All right. Well, welcome everyone to tonight's talk, which is Help Your Neurodivergent Child Prepare to Apply to a Four-Year College by Josephine Vonarburg. Welcome to the Autism College Connection. At the Autism College Connection, our mission is to connect parents, students, and schools with the best information about college, as well as alternatives to college for students with autism and similar issues. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura McKenna, and I'm the CEO and founder of the Autism College Connection. I have 3 decades of experience in education. I started off as a special education teacher in my early 20s. Later, I became a college professor with a PhD in politics and specialty in education policy. I'm a writer with headlines in the nation's top newspapers and magazines where I explore many topics, including colleges and autism. I work in my community to support students with disabilities. Not surprisingly, I'm an autism mom, and that's why I'm here. And my lawyer friends tell me I have to put a disclaimer on all of our talks. So this is the obligatory disclaimer. The Autism College Connection LLC does not provide legal, accounting, or tax advice. So no tax advice, Josephine, tonight. This
No
webinar,
worries.
this webinar is prepared for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide. It should not be relied upon for legal, accounting, or tax advice. You should consult your own tax, legal, and accounting advisors before engaging in any transaction. With that out of the way, welcome Josephine. Josephine Vonarburg is an independent education consultant and the owner of Transitions College Advising. She specializes in guiding students with learning differences and their parents through the complex process of finding a college or other post-secondary programs. Before becoming an IEC, Josephine worked as a learning specialist at Fairleigh Dickinson University's Regional Center for Learning Disabilities. She serves on multiple committees for the Independent Education Consultants Association and the Higher Education Consultants Association. You can find her at www.transitioncollegeadvising.com. Welcome to Josephine. Josephine's going to talk to us tonight about the issues that we should think about as we prepare to send our neuro-spicy kids to a four-year college. We're going to learn from Josephine how to create an appropriate college list. She's going to talk to us about what a good fit means, what are some questions that we should ask on the college tour, and more. So thank you for joining us today, Josephine. We
Thank
are
you so much.
we
It's
are
great to be here.
great.
And I'm going to share my screen.
And I am going to make you the host.
Thank you. Tell me when I should start.
You can start now.
Okay. So I'm so happy to be here to talk about a part of the college application process and one of the more important parts. Let me start by sharing the plan for our webinar today. So I'm going to talk a little bit through the introduction and give you some context about the subject of tonight's talk. I want to explain what good fit is, what the concept is, and why it's important. And then I want to give you tips and tools and resources on how to actually do the work of creating a list of colleges your child can apply to. I want this to be a practical hour where you walk away knowing not just how to do what you need to do, but what the tools are available to you out there, mostly online, there are books, and I'm going to share all that with you at the end. And then there'll be room for questions at the end. So let's start with some context. I think that when people think of the college planning process, they think of the applications, writing the essays, filling out the applications and submitting them. When in fact, I see this as a 4-step process. And each step is crucial to set your child up for success. That's the whole game. That's the goal here, is to set them up for success. So I'll go over all the skills and narrow in the steps and narrow in on the one that I'm going to focus on. So the step one is understanding what college readiness skills are and helping your child develop those. Last month, Laura hosted a webinar with Beth Felsen. That was a fantastic overview of what college readiness skills are, how they're developed, how you can recognize them, and different strategies to use. The second step, once you've identified that these skills are growing and your child will in fact be ready for college, and that's something that they wish for in their post-secondary plan, then the next step is to identify colleges that might be a good fit. And that takes time. There's research to do and things to look out for. Then after that, the applications are filled out and submitted. And then the last step, which is very important, is once the student has decided where they want to go, is to spend some time thinking about the transition, what they need to launch successfully, including things like setting up accommodations on the college campus, identifying resources. But for today's talk, I'm going to focus on this step two, how to think about college in terms of fit for the individual student. Well, let's talk about what fit is. A general definition of good fit is a college that aligns closely with the student's academic and social goals. So it's not one thing. A student can have many goals. And I think on your radar is also the support available there. So how do you determine that? Well, first of all, let me tell you how you don't think of college, how to put colleges on a list. And that's by asking this question: what is the best college for, and then fill in the blank, for students with, ADHD, autism, learning disability? There is no one college that's good for those specific things. And another question that I don't particularly like is, what's the best college for X major? Again, that's usually the people want to think about everything as a ranking, and there are the best colleges for engineering, the best colleges for business, but the factors that go into creating that ranking really don't have very much to do with your students' needs. So the right question to ask is, what's the best college for, fill in your child's name? And that's what we're going to talk about, how to define it. I'm going to go over the things to think about in the first half of the presentation. And then in the second half, I will introduce the tools and resources that exist to help you answer the questions that you're looking to answer for your particular student. Okay, so good fit, generally speaking, looks at several factors. First, we want to look at what support is available on campus, and we'll talk a little bit about what different types of support are there and how to learn about them. We think about good fit in terms of the academic fit for the student, the majors available, the classes and how they're taught, and a lot of factors there. We can also look at the social fit for the student and how to determine if it is a good social fit. And finally, something that can't be ignored is the financial fit, how to determine if the college will be affordable for you, how financial aid is decided, and understanding that some colleges give money that's non-need-based, others need-based, and that's a discussion to have too. So let's go over the individual potential factors that you can consider when looking at colleges for your student. And I just came up with some very common ones that parents think about. And notice I don't have support yet. That's going to be I'm going to talk about that eventually, but you can also think about things that are important to you. The location, how far are you willing to send your child? Can they be far away if they want to continue maybe therapy or whatever they need to continue to be supported? The size of the school, would your child be happy on a school campus where they have to take the bus to get from their dorm to classes, or do they want a small school with small classes? Majors, although it's not absolutely essential to know what major they're interested in the beginning, if they do have a very specific major in mind that isn't offered everywhere, then it is important to consider major. The curriculum, what does that look like? What are the general education classes that the college requires? And is that something that is important to you, that the student doesn't want to take a lot of writing classes and reading classes, for example? What are the clubs and organizations on the campus? Are there things outside of the classroom that your child is interested in that they'd like to be involved in when they get to college? And that's important to creating a sense of belonging when they get there. What is the campus culture? Is it a campus where sports is everything, and will your child feel included or left out, and where the whole culture revolves around sports or Greek life or things like that? What are the housing options? How easy is it to get single housing if they need that? Or are they required to live on campus all 4 years? What are those things look like? And then the financial fit. Other possible, and of course, we want to look at the support. So it's important to know that all campuses have certain very basic levels of support, and you want to research what those look like. So every campus has tutoring and writing centers, but they look very different. The training for the tutors is different, or the hours of the tutoring center may be different, or the ease with which the student can set up tutoring appointments can look very different from campus to campus. In addition, some campuses, although not all, have academic coaching to help students stay on track. Some schools offer study skills workshop at the beginning of the semester, which helps with the transition to college. Other colleges offer supplemental instruction in difficult classes so they can go to additional small group tutoring sessions automatically. They're built in. The top half of support services are included in the tuition. You don't have to pay extra, they're there, but the student has to get what they need when they need it. The bottom half of the page are those support programs that I think some of you are familiar with. The structured comprehensive support programs where there are more robust wraparound services. And these do exist, but at a limited number of colleges and often at an additional cost. So maybe $3,500 a semester extra, sometimes more, sometimes less. And what's nice about these programs is that they provide professional support on a regular basis. So a student will have a scheduled maybe 3 times a week appointment with a learning specialist who is somebody trained in that has a background in special education or writing or something like that. It's also important to note that these programs are not only limited, but they don't all address every need. Some programs are designed to give support to certain types of profiles and other programs are not. So you'd have to research that. And then also, students need to apply separately to these programs. So learning about the application process. So I think a lot of parents, let me just stop here for a second. Think about this. This is the most important thing. What colleges can support my child? But as we just saw from the previous slide, there are a lot of other things to think about to make sure a college is the right fit for a student. And one final factor to think about, and again, the goal here is to create a list of colleges your child wants to apply to before at the beginning of their senior year, let's say. So the colleges not only need to meet whatever criteria you and your child are looking for, but we have to make sure the student can get into the colleges and the list is balanced. So we have to research the admissibility. Can the child get in? And colleges typically look at the same thing for every student: GPA, high school curriculum, meaning what classes have they taken. Some schools have a minimum math requirement or foreign language requirement. Standardized test scores, although they're mostly not required anymore, there are certain majors and certain schools that still require them, and you'd have to find that out. Also, colleges tend to look at extracurricular involvement. Are they doing things in the summer? Are they involved in clubs? And then finally, the essays that the student writes. So you want to create a list, having researched all of these factors, understanding the support available on the college, and making sure that the student can be admitted to the schools on the list. With all this information, so the question is, I just ran through a list of a lot of factors. So the question is, how can you learn about these things? And secondly, what do you do with this information? Okay. Before I share the tools and resources available to get this information, I want to suggest a couple of things. Number one, make sure that you as a family decide which factors are most important to you. You can't have everything. There are, for example, if the most important factor is distance, that's going to limit the number of schools. Or if a certain major, which is a very unique major, is at the top of your list, that will limit the number of schools you can put on your list. So I recommend to my students, choose 3 to 4 factors, 3 to 4 criteria that are important to you and prioritize them. What are your non-negotiables? If distance is your non-negotiable, that goes on the top of the list, and then you use that as your research. If the support program is your non-negotiable, that goes on the top of your list, and everything else can follow after that. But you need to choose the 3 to 4 factors that are important to you and look up those particular factors for every school. You want to be comparing apples to apples. I'm not a believer that support needs to be the number one factor for students who are neurodivergent. If you have 3 other factors that are more important than that, for a variety of reasons, there are ways to bring in support from third parties once the student starts school. And I'll talk about ways you can build the scaffolding around the student once they get to college if there's no robust support program right on campus. Okay, so let's talk about the ways to find out this information. Number one, the best place to find out about all this information, say the most important thing is the major, or you want to know about activities, or you want to know if they have study abroad, or if they do experiential learning, is to start with the college website. That's the most important thing to start with when you do your research. And I suggest the following 4 things. Number one, go to admissions. Every college website has certain categories or certain pages that listed links at the top of their page. And one of them is admissions. And this is before you even visit colleges. We're going to talk about visiting colleges, but before you visit a college, you can start your research from home, from your computer. And if you go under admissions, nowadays, it's possible to register for virtual visits. That wasn't the case before COVID. This is something that we have now since COVID, which is wonderful. So you go to admissions, you go under campus visit, and it'll usually give you choices of in-person or virtual. And it's a great way to start learning about the school. And when you register, this is a very important tip. It must be the student's contact information. The college doesn't want the parent information. They want the student email and the student information. And I recommend that when you start this process, you create an email specifically for this for your student, because once you register for the very first virtual visit, he or she is going to start getting bombarded with emails. And some of my students find it really helpful to have a separate email for that the parent and the student have access to, and that way the parent can follow up and see the confirmation for the visit, to remind them to go to the webinar when they signed up or whatever. So everything that the student does that has contact with the college, they need to be leading that. It needs to be with their email, their name, their contact info. So start with the virtual visits if the college has one. And a lot of times, if a college has a structured support program, they have their own information sessions virtually, which is really helpful. And this is the season, it's starting. The spring is virtual visit season. So you could see a lot of things going on now if you visit college websites. The second thing you want to look up is information, obviously, about the majors. And you'll find information about that under academics. So do they have majors that are interesting to your child if they have some idea of what they want to do? And then I suggest students go even further, click on that major, and then look and see what the course requirements are for that major. Sometimes students have ideas that they want to do, I don't know, computer science, until they see that there's a lot of math required to do it. So find out about what the academic requirements are. And then not just the course requirements for the majors, but also, like I said, the general education requirements. Whatever your child majors in, they're going to have to take a series of courses in broad subjects. Another thing that I tell my students to look at on a college website is student or campus life. And under that, they can see what organizations and clubs are there, what events are coming up. Does that look like a place that has things they're interested in? Maybe they want to play an intramural club. I have a lot of students interested in right now, ultimate frisbee is very popular. So does the school have ultimate frisbee? Maybe a dance group that isn't the main dance group. Do they want to do theater as a non-theater major? So looking at campus or student life on the website. And then also, whatever else interests you, you can always look for through the search bar. Every college website has a search bar, usually on the top right. So you can look up, you put in the word tutoring, and then you can find out what they have to share about tutoring. You can look up accommodations, and it'll take you to their accessibility page that tells you what accommodations are available, how to register for them. Maybe you want to look up things about the orientation or about study abroad or about internships, the career services office. You can get a lot of information just from starting at the school website. Other places that you can find information that you are looking for in terms of what colleges would be a good fit for your child. Again, we go back to these structured support programs. Do they exist? Where are they? What types of learning profiles do they accommodate? So there's a book called The K&W Guide that lists a lot, not all, but a lot of the main structured programs around the country. And that's a book. But the next three are websites that are searchable databases. And I'm going to I forgot to mention that I'm going to send this deck to Laura to share with you. And these are all live links. You can go right to each of these websites. So you can search by state. you can search by if they work with students with ADHD, or if they work with students on the autism spectrum. It'll tell you how big the program is, how many professionals are there, how many students go there. And these four resources are the best to find colleges with structured support programs. But again, there are not an infinite number of them. It is a small grouping of colleges, but if they exist, they'll be mentioned in one of these four places. To find out additional information about colleges, say how many students are there, what the faculty-student ratio is, what the acceptance rate is, how many students are out of state there, if it's a regional college or not. These websites, the Department of Education hosts College Navigator and College Scorecard, and they have a lot of just statistics about the school, how many, the male-female ratio, the retention rate, the graduation rate, all of these things will be available on these websites. And the private websites, Big Future or College Data, are two of my favorites. There are many, many more. And I have a resource sheet that I'm going to share with you that has more. But these two I like a lot. College Data will give you information about how big the classes are on a college campus, if that's your top factor. You have to decide what's most important to you. And these websites will help you get more information about that. The FIS Guide is another book. It's just a large, thick guidebook of colleges with a lot of general information about the schools, about their culture, their histories, and not every school is mentioned in them. There are only about 350, but it's also a good place to do a little more research to figure out if it's the right fit for your child. And then the websites to help you figure out admissibility. You want to go to the college website itself to find out what the admissions requirements are. You can use something called the Common Data Set. And the Common Data Set is statistics and data collected by the Department of Education every year from colleges. And a report is generated that most colleges will make available directly on their websites. So if you Google any college name and the letters CDS, and you look through section C, it'll tell you what the college is looking for in terms of what classes the students took, what GPA they're looking for, what percentage of students that applied submitted SAT scores or ACT scores. It'll give you an idea of where your child is in relation to the other students applying and getting accepted there. And then finally, if you go to large public schools, usually they use Naviance, platforms like Naviance and Score, and you can play around with the famous scattergrams that'll show you based on GPA usually where your student is in the clump of students that apply to that same school in previous years. And that gives you an idea if they can get in there, if it's a target, if they're likely get in, or if it's out of reach. So you want to know that. You don't want them to apply to 12 schools that they can't get into. In terms of visiting the schools, here are some tips for the college visits, how to plan them, and what to look for. So again, registering in the student's name. Again, students' email, students' contact information, their cell phone number. And they'll get the confirmation. They're the ones that when you show up, they have to say, I'm here and I signed up for this. And I would think about registering early because there are popular times of the year for families to visit. Spring break, February break, if schools have it. So usually think a month or two ahead of time. And if possible, visit when colleges are in session. It's useful to see what the other students there are like. Do they look friendly? Do they look like students that your child can connect with? If you ask a question, do they answer, and are they opening doors for you? There's a lot you can determine from seeing the other students on campus. I think one of the most important things when you visit a college campus is to have a plan and to look for the same thing on each college campus. So again, the same idea is pick 3 to 4 criteria and look at that at every school. If it's teacher-student ratio, look at that at every school. Again, if it's distance, look at that at every school. If it's availability of a certain major, look at that at every school. And you want to do the same when you visit a college. And in addition, you want to give yourself a target on what to look for. It's pretty overwhelming to walk on a college campus the first time, especially for the student, and everything is new. They can't decide what's important and what isn't important. And I want to share, this is a worksheet. Can you see the worksheet that I put up here, Laura?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, so I recommend that I'm going to send this to everybody too, but I recommend that the student make a copy of this and the parents make a copy of this separately and read through all of the things that you can look for on a college campus. Everything from support services to accessibility services. And if there's a support program, what are you looking for there? But there are a set of questions here that students and parents should think about when they go to on a college campus. For example, academic factors. What are the required courses? Are there concentrations and specializations? Are there internships that are required or available? Are there capstone projects? What's the core curriculum? What is advising like? These are all things that parents and students could be asking about and listening for when they go on a college visit. And I think what's helpful is to read through all of this before you go to your first college visit. And then it gives you, you're listening for certain types of information, and it makes it more productive, the whole visit more productive. But again, you want to fill a form out for every school and then try to look for the same things that are important to you. And finally, when you go on college campuses, don't be afraid to ask about tutoring, the writing center, the wellness center, if there are mental health resources. How often can a student go? Some colleges will cap the number of visits per semester, and what other support services they have. When you do a guided tour, the students that lead those tours have a script, and they'll usually tell you about these things. But if you're not hearing what you're looking for, don't be afraid to ask questions. Also, to get more information about the structured support programs, I would recommend that you call ahead of time. Once you know when you're going to visit, you've registered through admissions, you have to make a separate call to the structured support program and ask if somebody there can visit with you and your child, and you can ask questions. You can see where they're located. You can find out how often they meet with the students, what services they provide. The problem with meeting with people from the support programs is that they're not there on the weekends. So many colleges do offer tours on Saturdays, but I think it's important for you to, if you can, arrange to be able to go during the week, because I think these are very important meetings. And also stop in the accessibility service office. That's where and they have different names on every college campus. Sometimes they're called disability service office. Sometimes they're called resource office. Every college is a little different. And you can find out what other services they offer. Some college accessibility resource offices help students learn about adaptive technology, to manage their schedule, to take notes, and they have somebody dedicated to that on campus. Some accessibility service offices have their own advisors that help students choose classes based on other things. So it's a good place to stop. Some parents are concerned that if they do go to these locations, there'll be disclosure to the admissions office. And I can tell you that after having worked in these settings for many years, they don't communicate who visits them to admissions. So it would be private. The student's privacy is always protected. So I wouldn't worry about that, but you can find out a lot about can I see my child coming here? Are these, are there services that will benefit them? I would encourage the student to ask questions. I know that parents have a lot of questions, but maybe if you have this discussion, what things are important to you? Again, if you know that you should be looking at 3 to 4 tops 5 factors wherever you go, maybe help the student prepare questions that they're going to ask. And typically, once the tour is finished, the tour guide will always say, does anybody have any extra questions? I always like to ask, what do students do on the weekends? What is your favorite thing about this college? Why did you choose to come here? Or sometimes they can ask, what are some things that you'd want to change? Go to you can ask about academics. What's the hardest class you've ever taken? How are the professors? Are they accessible? Can you easily meet with them? But I would encourage the student to ask those questions. And again, they should be based on the things that you think are important for them to make a college a good fit for them. And then also, when you walk away, when you leave, make sure you know the names of everybody you've spoken to. It's a good idea to send a little follow-up thank you, or maybe you'll have additional questions in the end. And I have 3 final thoughts. So the first one is the timing. When does this all start? Now, remember, this is 2 of 4 parts of the entire college application process. And this particular part, typically, ideally, should be done by the time the student starts senior year of high school. And if it hasn't happened by then, that's okay too, but this is the ideal world. And there are a few reasons why. Number one is some of these, the programs, the structured support programs have separate applications. And some of them fill up before the end of the year. Some of them already have wait lists in January. So if a student applies early action by the beginning of November, they have a better chance of getting into these programs if that is something that's important to you. And I also think it's nice for the student to kind of have their off their backs in a senior year so they can enjoy it and just wait for the decisions to come in, because they want to spend the spring doing the transition part. So ideally, this is something that you start sophomore year or maybe the middle of junior year. And then your goal is to have a list of colleges that the student wants to apply to by the end of the summer, maybe end of September at the latest. The second important thing I want to say is that the student needs to be engaged in the process. They need not just in doing the research and spending time on the computer on those websites and reading the books that we discussed, but also they need to be choosing the criteria with you. They need not necessarily lead the process, but at least be engaged in it. Because in the end, one of the most important factors in college success, beyond being college ready, beyond having the right fit college, is that the student wants to be there in the college that they're attending. So if an important criteria for you is the support program, that the student doesn't like any of the colleges with the support program, then there needs to be discussion about how to get support from outside sources. There are companies that do virtual tutoring, virtual executive function support, and if the student is comfortable with virtual meetings, but then you can also contact the college, usually the tutoring center or the accessibility support center, and they can help find people locally. That can also happen, and they can meet them maybe in the college library. So make sure that the student also has a say in what's important to them. They have to, it's a long 4 years if they don't want to be where they are. And again, this is all about setting your student up for success. I didn't mention what the right number of colleges is, but I think applying to no more than 12 is a good idea. 7 to 12, but not more. The Common App caps that at 20, but I think it's a lot of work to get these applications out. And if you start early, you can refine your list so you have just enough colleges where your child would be happy at any of them, and then you apply and then see what happens when the decisions come out. So that's all I have. I want to speak for 40 minutes, so I got it in right before a quarter to 8, exactly, almost as we planned.
Perfect timing, Josephine. Well, yes. First, I'm going to jump in and ask my own questions. I'm the hostess privilege. I get to jump in and ask the first questions. Everybody else, start typing your questions in the comments section, and I will read them out to Josephine momentarily. So let's talk. Can we? Thank you. Fabulous talk. Fabulous talk. So many of our kids don't have, guidance counselors around the country today. There's just not enough guidance counselors, and specifically ones that are familiar with what an Office of Disability is. It's hard to find. So I
Mhm.
really appreciate your expertise and sharing your input on the whole application process for our kids. Um, uh, do you think that students with like a learning disability or autism, they should approach the college application process a little differently than a typical kid? Or is it really like, going on the college tour? I mean, is it the same no matter what the profile is of the kid?
I think the process is exactly the same, but there are more offices to visit. If that's the only difference. That if I have students that have very different profiles. And some need a lot of support, some will need a lot less when they get into college, some will be just fine with just the basic accommodations, but the process is always the same. Then the most important thing is fit, the right fit. And that comes from deciding what is most important for that child. And if it's support, then you lead with that. And then you visit those offices and pick up the phone and ask the questions. But everything else is pretty much the same. I have to say it's more important. I would say that fit is more important for our students
Okay.
than others. Yeah.
You talk about colleges with structured support, and you contrasted it with Office of Disability Services. Could you give us a little bit more background on what structured support means, a structured support program?
Okay. So I think I want to frame it as it's a continuum. So there are mandated support programs on a college campus by law, by the ADA and the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. So there is an office where they are required to provide accommodations based on certain disabilities or other issues, and they will, if you go on the college website and you type in accommodations in the search bar, it'll take you to the page where they organize that, and they'll tell you what documentation that's required by law in every single college. And what you're going to get from that office is extended time or distraction-free testing, permission to record a lecture, that type of thing. If you want to ask for a single room, which is a very hard thing to come by, that would be through them, emotional support animals, that's who does it. And that's at every college. No extra cost, that's included in tuition. Then every college also has tutoring and writing support, and often nowadays we see more and more executive function support. That's not mandated, but it exists everywhere. It's just expected that that's there. The third group is what we're talking about, this additional, very robust support program that exists in just a few colleges. And um, they provide anywhere from specialized tutoring to executive function coaching to academic advising. And they only work with students that have documentation in a certain area. So, for example, at Syracuse, there's a program called On Track, or there used to be, I think it's still there. And all they work with students who have ADHD, and you apply to that program after you've been accepted to the college, and you provide documentation, and they accept a certain number of students. It's limited. These programs are capped, but there's an additional charge. You have to pay a few $1,000s more a year. So at Drexel, there's a program for autism support. At St. Joseph's University, there's a program for autism support. At Ramapo College, there's in this area in the Northeast, there are many in New England. There are fewer in the South and in the West, but there are those, they're there too. And that's where you use, I don't, the K, you start with either the KNW guide or one of those, or you could do a bunch of websites on that page, and I'll share the deck with you, and you can search them by geographical location and by learning profile that is covered. So that is not mandated. It is not on every college campus. It is an extra fee. It is an extra application and sometimes interview in many cases. But when the student is there, they are supported by a group of professionals that will meet several times a week with the student and make sure they're getting their accommodations and help them through potential issues in a class. That's what I did for years. That's the type of program I worked in for years.
I'm just down the block from Ramapo College, which offers a program called the Enhanced Program for students with autism. And what they do, they have counselors on staff that can work with, they have groups, they have that work on anxiety and social skill issues. They have peer mentors that help with the social skills that can be very difficult for students for autism on a college campus. It's a very successful program. The students tend to who are in that program tend to only take 3 classes per semester to start off with. And there's just it is definitely more supported, and more of these programs are opening up all the time.
Yes, I've seen a growth in the years that I've been in this field, and there are more and more. And I see also a move in those programs to work a lot on career preparation more than was the case 10 years ago. So that's a nice thing to hear too.
One last question. I mean, I had a client call me up. Student was great student, like had like nearly perfect SATs, straight A student, AP classes, but had an autistic profile with a lot of anxiety. And the parents wanted to know, this was a student who could get into Dartmouth or Williams, or, a very highly competitive college, but had the anxiety from, an autism diagnosis. The parents wanted to know, do they recommend going to a college that's less selective, less competitive to reduce the pressure on the student?
It depends on other aspects of the college. So selectivity is again one factor of many. But if it's a lesser, there's an impression that if a student goes to a college that's less selective, the workload won't be as heavy. But professors in every college kind of want the same work from the student. So what changes is what other students are there, how competitive is the feel of the school. If it's a school where they're curving all of the scores in every class, it just feels more competitive and less collaborative. So I would say selectivity is not the question. The question is, how collaborative is the environment? How supportive is the environment? So there are selective colleges like a Connecticut college, for example, is a selective small liberal arts college, but it feels supportive there, even though there's much more collaborative. Muhlenberg has that feel to it. There are schools that are selective, but the students are kind and collaborative, and there are opportunities to participate in activities outside of class. So it's not about the selectivity; it's about the culture of the campus. So that's how and again, visiting and being there when the students are there, and then talking to the people in the support programs, or if they don't have a support program, in the disability services office about, how do you have a lot of students with anxiety, and what accommodations do they have, and how does that work?
Okay.
And they might say that maybe a reduced course load is a good accommodation, and you work from there.
Okay, we are going into the comment section. Lauren asks, how do you get the initial list of schools to start with? She's used ChatGTP a bit, but is there a comprehensive list? Like in the old days, they had the insider's guide.
So in my um, in my presentation, one and again, this will be shared in the resource guide. There's a website that I like to start with. It's the College Navigator. Again, it's run by the Department of Education, and if you can search colleges, you can create a list. You can put in filters: geographic location, size of the school, how competitive, major, on-campus housing, and then hit click, and it'll give you an initial list of schools. And of course, the more criteria you put in, the smaller the list of schools are. So you can choose not just by state, but by region, by, 10, do you want, is 10,000 students, 2,000 students, what's the size? Public or private? There's a bunch of filters to put in on the left side. And it's not the fanciest website, but it does the trick to get you an initial list. By the same token, Big Future is a website that was also on my list, and that's run by the College Board, but they have a really nice college search function, which you again, you put in geographic location, and then you can put in also if you need LD support. That's one of the filters. If you want a certain NCAA sport, what majors, and again, it'll crunch out a list for you of colleges, and maybe that's a good place to start. If you have an idea of the major, if you know if there's certain criteria if you have two criteria in mind, you can start with those lists and then narrow them down from there. Yeah.
Okay. Amy asks, how do you help your student, a current senior, to choose a major without choosing one for him? Mine wants to go to a university in our town and live at home. He's taken career assessments and has a short list of potential careers. He's indecisive by nature, and his stock answer for many things is, I don't know. He wants to go to college. I mean, teens, they're all the same. He wants to go to college, but otherwise drags his feet on making decisions. He can enroll as undeclared, undecided, but I feel that would only prolong his decision making.
Right. So a couple of things about majors. In a four-year college, you don't need to declare a major typically until the end of sophomore year. So some colleges don't even want you to declare a major or pick one to begin with. Now, there are some exceptions, like engineering, some business schools want you to pick a major, but so there's that. So you can apply undeclared, and then they will force you to take a variety of classes. And then, and in college, once you're there, you're assigned an advisor, a person that will meet with the student halfway through every semester to pick the courses for the following semester. And that person has two jobs: to make sure the student is going to graduate on time. That's what the push is. Everybody four and out the door sort of attitude, even though most students don't graduate in 4 years. And the second thing is that they know they're taking enough classes to declare a major by sophomore year. So there will be a professional on every college campus when they get there to guide them through the process. Another thing, but what you can do at home, and I do this with my students, is have them look at the course requirements for any particular major. There are many colleges on their website. If you go on the academics page and then you pick the major, it'll give you the 4-year plan. You can see what they have to take first semester freshman year, second semester freshman year. And that makes it real. And then if they have unrealistic majors in mind, like, I want to major in finance, I want to, do something on Wall Street, but the student doesn't like math, they're going to see that there's a lot of math courses to take for that major. So that makes it a little more real right there. And another source that I use is ONET, which is another government site that you fill out a questionnaire and it kind of crunches out potential majors based on your interests. And that's a good way to go. But for me, what's been most effective with my students is having them look at the course requirements for the majors they think they want to major in. And then we begin to talk about, well, a major is more than just, a title. It's a series of classes that you're going to be required to take over the next 4 years or more. Yeah.
I'm going to put on my college professor hat for a second. I think that one of the purposes of college is to explore the world and to take a lot of different classes. I think I actually prefer for students not to go into college set in their head, I am going to be a history major. I think that it's, there's so many opportunities to take wonderful classes at college and to explore. One of my favorite classes I took when I was at SUNY Binghamton in the mid 80s was an art history class. I just took it randomly and I still remember it today. And so I think that college should be about the exploration and trying out different classes because you don't know. I mean, 18-year-old beings, they're not baked yet. They don't know who they are. And part of what the opportunity at a college is to take a class in Shakespeare, to take a class in computers, just test things out and see what makes, your heart sing. All right, my favorites, like I'm going to tell one personal story here. So when I was at Binghamton, this was my strategy. I took classes and everything, and I started getting letters from the administration department that I really had to pick a major. So I was online second semester, my sophomore year, or beginning of my junior year, and I had to pick a major, and I'm like counting them up. And it turns out I had equal number of classes in political science, an equal number of classes in English, and I decided same GPA, and I decided to go for political science because I thought the guys were cuter. So sometimes people will make these random decisions, and we have to remember that our kids are still young and they're going to grow when they're in college. And we just want to give them the room to grow and not to lock them into, okay, this is who you are. You're going to be a computer science guy. I think that we just have to give them this space. And, it's such a privilege to be on a college campus and be able to take classes in all sorts of different areas. Professors are going to they're all going to be interesting and love their work and have their own quirks. And you might end up taking one class in, German literature and just, that one class changes your world. So we just want to, I think, give all of our kids, that room to grow and be flexible.
Can I say one more thing? I was talking to Laura before we started, and I visit about 50 college campuses a year at least. And one thing that I've noticed over the past 5 years is how early colleges are integrating, connecting the students with career services now. And a lot of colleges are offering these freshman year, how to freshman or how to college courses, and they'll get a visitor from career services. So they're recognizing that too, that students are having trouble deciding. And I think there's so many majors out there that didn't exist when we went to school. So between the advisor that the student will have to make sure they're on academic track to graduate and the integration of career services very early on, and it's becoming almost the norm everywhere I go. And I think it's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think all of these how to college classes that they're doing, even, the summer before classes start. I think that this is all, helping more kids graduate.
And somebody commented there are a lot of hybrid majors these days too. Yes, and there's design your own major, and you can major, minor, concentrate in. So yes, it's a lot more fluid than it used to be back in the day.
Sandra asks, do you recommend working with a college counselor to help with this process? It can be incredibly pricey, but sometimes it might be easier to do it correctly and get acceptance, especially with essays. If so, are there any particular firms that you would recommend? Well, Josephine,
Well,
well.
well, yeah, well, I want to say that I don't know where you're located. I think high schools do. If I find that if you reach out to the guidance counselor, they will give you some good advice. I think they're not going to come to the student to give a lot of individual advice. So you can start. Sometimes they'll help you build the list from the get go, and then you can research that. Yes, but there are a lot of companies. Some companies do sliding scale. So you can email me and I can give you the names of different people depending on where you're located if you want somebody local. So feel free to email me and I can send you the names of people that I know that, and also depends, like a lot of us have our junior year classes are filled already. So if it depends on who has space and not right now, but I would be happy to to give you names of where, and there's also a lot of stuff on computer on YouTube. There are a lot of webinars to go to help you through it, but it is a complicated process with a lot of moving parts. And especially if you have a child who has trouble managing long-term projects with several parts, it is helpful to have somebody to walk through it with you. Yeah.
Felix asked if we're going to share the recorded session, and I said yes. What I'll probably do is create a link and put it on YouTube and give you guys a link, and I'll also provide, Josephine will have other material that she will send to all of you too.
Yeah, I'll send all my forms. I have a form that I use for the college research where you pick your criteria and you fill it out. I have the college visit form. I have a list of other resources and books. So, and I'll share the deck too, and all the slides. Those are live links to all of those websites. So all of that will be available to you.
Yeah, and Elizabeth also asks about majors, saying, how do you help your student who has no, idea at all about and really wants to become a professional YouTuber?
Well, YouTubers have a lot of skills. It just
I know,
being an expert in anything, you can become a YouTuber. Yeah.
right? So again, I guess we sort of talked about like how to like learn more about like what you're interested in. You can look at the courses, the course guides. You could just take, sometimes you have to take a year's worth of classes in order to see what makes you happy. Um, yeah, Lauren says she picked a major by looking through the college guide. Yeah. My son has been successful starting at a junior college and will be graduating this spring. He plans to transfer to a four-year university in the fall. So I also think that, even for students that we expect to go to college, sometimes they might need an intermediate spot first before
Mm-hmm.
they go there, whether it's a community college or a gap year. And I think for every kid who is going to go to a four-year college, it's worth having that conversation. You know, let's think for a second. What are the alternatives? There are alternatives to going to a four-year college, and I just think everybody should at least spend a little bit of time thinking whether, maybe ruling it out. No, I don't want to go to a community college first, but at least think about it.
And can I say one more thing is that this process, that four-step process that I described, where is the student college ready and making the college list, applying, you can do the whole thing and still take a gap year
Hmm.
because the vast majority of colleges, there are some that are an exception, will allow students to set what is called to take to defer their first year. You request it when you've been accepted through the Department of Admissions, and they'll hold your spot for a year.
Right.
So they have a college that's accepted to them, and they're going to hold their spot, and they can take a year and do things. Like I have a couple of students doing gap year right now. One of them is interested in marine biology, and she found an internship for the second half of the year. She did 12 weeks at a program, I think, in Cape Cod that had a lab, and she did
Right.
that. And then she never took a foreign language in high school because of dyslexia. So she's been taking online courses that's always been a dream of hers. So it's not a year off, it's a year on where you're developing skills, maybe just growing. So you can still keep a gap year on the radar and do this process because it is a lot easier to apply to college when you're still in high school because you're going to need the high school to get your transcripts, this
Yeah.
teacher recommendations, and that's all set for you. So I would recommend if you decide that your child is not ready for college right out of high school, talk to the guidance department to find out what they'll need to do to get access to transcripts and the letters of recommendation because the college is going to want that if they haven't done something in between.
Okay. Do college counselors also work with the child who's transferring from a community college?
Oh yeah, there's all people specialize in transfer, people specialize in grad school, people specialize in homeschooled students. There's all kinds of people. So if you send me those types of questions, I can hook you up with people who or several names so you can see what I don't know what other people charge, but I don't do transfers myself, but I know people that do. So I would want you to work with a specialist. Yeah.
Thank you, Josephine. This was fabulous talk. You really, I learned things from this, and I know our viewers did too. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. I hope you um, go to Josephine's website. What's your website called again, Josephine?
Transitionscollegeadvising.com. Very
Right.
exciting.
It gets it across, and
Job done.
yeah, and I usually do one or two webinars per month. I'm taking February off to do some college tours, but I'll be back in March, and I'll be doing another talk on transition programs, which is, for students who need a little bit more time before even really thinking about college. So, I think that's it for us tonight. Thank you again, Josephine, for joining us for this hour, and that's it. So, good night, everybody.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.